The silence in the royal nursery was the kind that screamed, 5 days. 5 endless days since Prince Kieran had taken a single bite of food, and the weight of that silence pressed down on every soul in the Silvercrest Citadel like a stone upon the chest. I stood outside the nursery door, my fingers twisted in the worn fabric of my kitchen apron, listening to the hushed, desperate voices within, healers, advisors, the most powerful wolves in the territory, all rendered helpless by a 3-year-old pup who refused to eat. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. His vitals are weakening. A healer's voice drifted through the crack in the door, tight with worry. Another day without nourishment and we risk permanent damage. He's already lost too much weight. What does the Alpha King say? Another voice, sharp with anxiety. What can he say? He's tried everything. The boy won't even look at him anymore. My heart clenched painfully in my chest. I shouldn't be here, lurking in corridors meant for those far above my station. I was nothing, an Omega kitchen worker, the lowest of the low, marked by rejection and shame. The scar on my left shoulder blade burned with phantom pain, a permanent reminder of the day my former pack had cast me out like refuse. Defective, broken, wrong. The words still echoed in my mind 3 years later, spoken by Alpha Matthias of the Raven Shadow Pack as he drove his claws across my back, severing the pack bond and leaving me to die in the wilderness. I had been 16, guilty only of possessing a voice that my packmates claimed was unnatural, too compelling, too strange, carrying an inexplicable power that frightened them. I had survived that wilderness, barely, crawling to the borders of Silvercrest territory, where a border patrol had found me more dead than alive. Alpha King Theron had granted me asylum, but only as the most invisible of servants. I worked in the kitchens, spoke to no one, kept my eyes down and my cursed voice silent. It was a half-life, but it was life. I had learned to be grateful for that much. The nursery door suddenly swung open, and I pressed myself against the wall, making myself smaller as 3 advisors emerged, their faces grim. They swept past without seeing me. I had perfected the art of being invisible over the years. When they disappeared around the corner, curiosity and something deeper, something that felt like a rope pulling at my heart, drew me closer to the door they'd left ajar. Through the gap, I could see into the nursery. It was a room designed for joy walls painted with forest scenes, toys scattered across plush carpets, a window that let in streams of afternoon sunlight. But joy had abandoned this space. In the center, beside a bed far too large for such a small occupant, sat Alpha King Theron. He was a man who commanded respect with his mere presence, broad-shouldered, tall as an ancient oak, with dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, the kind of dominance that made weaker wolves want to bare their throats in submission. I had seen him only from a distance in my years here, a figure of authority so far removed from my existence that we might as well have lived in different worlds. But now, watching him through that crack in the door, I saw something I had never seen before. Defeat. He sat slumped in a chair beside the small bed, his large hands covering his face, his massive shoulders trembling with barely suppressed emotion. On the bed lay a tiny figure, Prince Kieran, his platinum blonde hair a halo against white pillows, his small face gaunt and pale, eyes closed but clearly not sleeping. The child's breathing was shallow, his little chest rising and falling with effort. "Please, Kieran," Theron's voice was raw, stripped of all authority. Just a father begging his son. "Please, just a little. For me, for your father." The pup didn't respond, didn't even open his eyes. I watched as Theron reached for a bowl of broth on the bedside table, hands that could crush stone shaking as he brought a spoon toward his son's lips. "Please," he whispered again. Kieran turned his face away. The bowl slipped from Theron's hands, clattering to the floor, broth spreading across the carpet like spilled tears. The Alpha King made a sound, a broken, wounded noise that no ruler should ever make, and buried his face in his hands once more. Something inside me fractured. I didn't know this child. I had no right to care about the Alpha King's son, no claim to his pain or his father's grief. But in that moment, watching that small boy waste away and that powerful man crumble, I couldn't remain invisible. I couldn't stay silent. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory, the grandmother who had loved me, before the rejection, before the shame. Your voice is a gift, Mira, she used to tell me, stroking my hair as I sang to her in her final days. It carries the moon's blessing. Never be afraid of what you are. But I had been afraid. For 3 years, I had locked my voice away, speaking only in whispers when absolutely necessary, terrified that if anyone heard what made me different, they would cast me out again. I couldn't survive another rejection. The first had nearly killed me. Yet here, now, with a child dying and a father breaking, fear seemed suddenly small and selfish. Before I could talk myself out of it, before reason could stop me, I pushed the door open wider and stepped into the nursery. Theron's head snapped up, his grief instantly masked behind the cold facade of an alpha. His storm-gray eyes fixed on me, narrowing with surprise and the first hint of anger. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" I dropped immediately to one knee, head bowed, making myself as non-threatening as possible. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. "Forgive me, Alpha King. I am Mira. I work in the kitchens." My voice came out as barely a whisper, rusty from disuse. "The kitchens?" His tone was sharp, dangerous. "You have no business here. Leave. Now. Please," I said, the word escaping before I could stop it. I raised my eyes just enough to see Kieran on the bed, so small, so still. "Please, I might be able to help." "Help?" Theron stood, his full height and power bearing down on me like a physical weight. I felt my Omega instincts screaming at me to run, to submit, to disappear. Healers have tried. Mages have tried. What could a kitchen Omega possibly offer that they could not? The word stuck in my throat. How could I explain? How could I tell him about the thing that had gotten me rejected, cast out, marked as wrong? But looking at Kieran, at the shallow rise and fall of his chest, I knew I had to try. I can sing to him. The silence that followed was terrible. Then Theron laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound without humor. "Sing? My son is dying, and you offer me a song? Alpha King, please, I know how it sounds, but Get out." His voice dropped to a lethal quiet, the kind of tone that preceded violence. "Get out before I have you thrown in the cells for this insult." I should have obeyed. Every instinct told me to flee, to protect myself, to return to my invisible existence in the kitchens where I was safe. But when I looked at Kieran again, I saw myself a child, abandoned, hurting, alone. I saw the boy I had been, cast out and left to die. I couldn't walk away. "He's not eating because he's grieving," I said, my voice stronger now, desperation lending me courage I didn't know I possessed. "He lost his mother 6 months ago. He's a baby, and he doesn't understand why she's gone, why the world doesn't make sense anymore. He's given up." Theron's face went white, then flushed with rage. "You dare speak of my mate? You dare." "I lost my mother too," I interrupted, reckless now, committed to this path even if it led to my destruction. "I was 9, and I lost my father in the same attack. I know what it feels like when the whole world goes silent and cold, when food tastes like ash because the people who made life worth living are gone." The Alpha King stared at me, fury and something else, pain, recognition warring in his expression. "Your healers, your advisors, they're trying to fix his body." I continued, my words tumbling out now. "But his body isn't the problem. His heart is broken, Alpha King. And broken hearts don't respond to medicine. They respond to—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "To connection, to comfort, to being reminded that they're not alone." "And you think a song will provide that?" Theron's voice was still hard, but something in it had shifted. A crack in the armor. "I think," I said carefully, "that I have nothing to lose by trying, and that Prince Kieran has everything to lose if no one does." We stood there, Alpha King and rejected Omega, separated by a chasm of power and status but connected in that moment by the same desperate hope. I watched emotions chase across Theron's face. Anger, grief, exhaustion, and finally, the terrible surrender of a man who had run out of options. "One song," he said, his voice rough. "If it doesn't work, you leave, and never return to this wing of the Citadel. Understood?" "Yes, Alpha King." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And if you're wasting my son's remaining strength with this foolishness. He didn't finish the threat, but he didn't need to. I understood perfectly. I rose slowly and approached the bed, acutely aware of Theron's presence behind me, his gaze burning into my back. Up close, Kieran was even more fragile than I'd realized. His skin had a translucent quality, blue veins visible beneath the surface. His lips were chapped and pale. He looked like a small ghost, already halfway to the realm of the departed. My throat tightened with emotion, but I pushed it down. I had one chance. One opportunity to reach this child through the walls of grief he'd built around himself. I knelt beside the bed, placing my hand gently on the blanket near Kieran's small fist. He didn't react. "Hello, little prince," I whispered. "My name is Mira. I'm going to sing for you now. Is that all right?" No response. Not even a flicker of his eyelids. Behind me, I heard Theron shift impatiently. Time was running out. I closed my eyes, reaching deep within myself to the place I had locked away 3 years ago. The place where my voice lived, the voice that had gotten me rejected, cast out, marked as cursed. The voice my grandmother had called a gift. Please, I thought, sending the prayer to the moon goddess, to whatever forces governed the fates of broken wolves like me. Please let this work. Don't let this child die. And then I began to sing. The first note that emerged from my throat was soft, tentative, like the first drops of rain after a drought. But as I continued, the sound grew stronger, filling the nursery with a melody that seemed to come from somewhere beyond me, ancient and sorrowful and achingly beautiful. It was a lullaby my grandmother had sung to me, in the old tongue of the wolves, words that spoke of moonlight and safety, of the pack's embrace, and the eternal protection of those who watch from the stars. But woven through the words was something else, something I couldn't name or control. It was the thing that had always made my voice different, that had frightened my old pack. Power, pure and undeniable. Not the power of dominance or strength, but something older, something that reached past the mind and spoke directly to the soul. As I sang, I felt the air in the room change. It grew warmer, softer, as if the melody itself was wrapping around us like a blanket. I kept my eyes closed, pouring everything I had into the song, all my loneliness, all my grief, all my desperate hope that this child might hear me, might feel less alone. I sang of loss and comfort. I sang of darkness and the dawn that always follows. I sang of being broken and finding the strength to continue anyway. Time seemed to suspend itself. The nursery, the citadel, the whole world faded away until there was only the song and the fragile heartbeat of the child before me. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, I heard a soft intake of breath. My eyes flew open. Kieran's eyes were open too, staring at me with an expression of wonder. They were the most extraordinary eyes I'd ever seen, pale silver, like moonlight on water, framed by lashes as white as his hair. For a child who had been half dead moments ago, there was suddenly an alertness in that gaze that took my breath away. He was listening. I didn't stop singing, didn't dare break the fragile connection forming between us. I just held his gaze and poured my heart into every note, every word of the ancient lullaby. Slowly, impossibly, Kieran's small hand moved. It crept across the blanket toward me, fingers uncurling like a flower opening to the sun. When they touched my hand, his skin was cool but not cold, alive. Behind me, I heard Theron make a choked sound, but I didn't turn, couldn't turn. All my focus was on this child, this small, broken soul reaching out from the darkness that had claimed him. As the final notes of the lullaby faded into silence, Kieran whispered something so soft I had to lean closer to hear. "Mama." The word pierced my heart like a silver blade. "No, sweetheart," I said gently, my own eyes burning with unshed tears. "I'm not your mama, but she loved you very much. She's watching over you from the stars now, and she wants you to be strong. She wants you to eat and grow and live." Kieran's face crumpled, tears finally breaking free to stream down his gaunt cheeks. "I miss her," he sobbed, the words breaking on a hiccup. "I miss her so much." No," I whispered, unable to stop my own tears from falling. "I know, little one. It's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad. Everyone says I have to be brave," Kieran continued between sobs, his small body shaking. But I don't want to be brave. I want my mama. Being brave doesn't mean you can't cry, I told him, my thumb stroking gently over his small knuckles. Being brave means feeling sad and scared and angry, and choosing to keep going anyway. Your mama would be so proud of how brave you've already been. Will you? Will you sing again? Kieran asked, his voice small and fragile but present in a way it hadn't been before. Please? I looked up at Theron for the first time since I'd started singing. The Alpha King's face was wet with tears he made no effort to hide, his expression stripped of all authority and pride, leaving only a father's naked relief and gratitude. He nodded, unable to speak. I began another song, this one lighter, more hopeful. As I sang, a healer cautiously entered with a new bowl of broth. Kieran didn't turn away this time. When the spoon touched his lips, he opened his mouth and swallowed. One spoonful, then another. And another. By the time my second song ended, the small prince had consumed half the bowl more than he'd eaten in 5 days combined. Color was already beginning to return to his cheeks, and his eyes, though still sad, held a spark of life that had been absent before. Tired, he murmured, his eyelids drooping. Then sleep, little prince, I said softly, brushing his platinum hair back from his forehead in a gesture that felt achingly natural. I'll be right here. Promise? The question held the weight of a child who had been abandoned too many times already, if only by death and circumstance. I glanced at Theron again, seeking permission I wasn't sure I'd receive. He stared at me with an intensity that made my Omega instincts flutter nervously, but after a long moment, he nodded once more. I promise, I told Kieran, and watched as his eyes finally closed, his breathing deepening almost immediately into the peaceful rhythm of genuine sleep. The healer checked his vitals, her face transforming from worry to wonder. His heartbeat is stronger. She breathed, temperature normalizing. I've never seen anything like this. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and suspicion that I recognized all too well. It was the same look I'd received before the rejection, before the exile. The look that said, "What are you?" Fear crawled up my spine. I had revealed myself, exposed the very thing that had gotten me cast out before. What had I done? Everyone out, Theron commanded suddenly, his voice leaving no room for argument. Now. The healer will remain within calling distance, but I want the room cleared. The advisors and attendants who had been hovering in the doorway scattered immediately. The healer bowed and retreated to the antechamber, closing the door behind her. Silence fell over the nursery, broken only by Kieran's soft breathing. I remained kneeling beside the bed, my hand still near the sleeping prince's, waiting for judgment, waiting for the Alpha King to do what my former Alpha had done, declare me cursed, dangerous, wrong. Instead, Theron moved slowly around the bed until he stood directly before me. Then, to my utter shock, he dropped to one knee, bringing himself to my eye level. Look at me, he said quietly. I obeyed, lifting my gaze to meet his. Up close, his eyes were even more striking. Gray shot through with silver, like storm clouds threaded with lightning. They were eyes that saw everything, missed nothing. What are you? He asked. And though the question echoed in my memory with painful familiarity, his tone held no accusation. Only wonder. Broken. I whispered. The word that had defined me for 3 years. Wrong. Rejected. No. His voice was firm, absolute. Whatever you are none of those things. What? You just did. He glanced at his sleeping son, emotion flooding his features again. You brought him back from the edge of death with nothing but your voice. That is not the action of something broken or wrong. That is a gift. The word struck me like a physical blow. A gift. The same word my grandmother had used. My former pack didn't think so, I said bitterly, unable to keep the pain from my voice. They said my voice was unnatural, that it could compel wolves against their will, that I was dangerous. So they marked me as rejected and left me to die. Theron's expression darkened, his alpha power flaring briefly in anger but not at me. What pack? Raven Shadow. Alpha Matthias. It wasn't a question. Theron's jaw clenched. That fool has always feared what he doesn't understand. His loss is my gain. I didn't know how to respond to that. The Alpha King stood, offering me his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I took it, allowing him to help me to my feet. The difference in our sizes was staggering. My hand disappeared entirely in his, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You will stay with Kieran," Theron said, and there was command in his tone now, but also a question. "He clearly needs you, but I won't force this if you're unwilling. Your choice, Mira of the Kitchens." My choice. When had anyone ever given me a choice? I looked at Kieran, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. His small hand curled near where mine had been. Something in my chest tightened and expanded simultaneously, a feeling I couldn't name but recognized as important. "I'll stay," I said, "for as long as he needs me." "Good." Theron's expression softened slightly. "You'll be given quarters near the nursery. Anything you require, you have only to ask." "And Mira?" "Yes, Alpha King, thank you." The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was vast and deep. "You gave me back my son's life. There is no debt that could equal that, but I will try to repay it nonetheless." I didn't know what to say to that, so I simply bowed my head in acknowledgement. As Theron moved toward the door to brief the healers on what had occurred, I settled into the chair beside Kieran's bed, the chair that still held the warmth from where his father had sat hours earlier, breaking under the weight of grief. Kieran stirred slightly in his sleep, his hand reaching out. Without thinking, I offered my fingers, and his small hand closed around them with surprising strength. In that moment, I felt something I had never expected to feel again. Purpose. Not just existence, not just survival, but a reason to be. This child needed me, and perhaps, I realized with dawning wonder, I needed him too. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Soon, the moon would rise, the moon that governed all wolfkind, that supposedly blessed some with gifts while cursing others. For the first time in 3 years, I found myself grateful for my voice, grateful for the thing that had gotten me rejected, exiled, and nearly killed. Because it had led me here, to this moment, to this child who had called me Mama in his confusion and grief, to this chance at redemption I never thought I'd receive. I began to hum softly, a gentle melody to ensure Kieran's sleep remained peaceful. And as I hummed, I felt the rejection scar on my shoulder blade, that permanent mark of shame, begin to burn less fiercely. Perhaps, I thought, some broken things could be made whole again. Perhaps some gifts were worth the cost of receiving them. Perhaps this was my new beginning. The moon had risen full and luminous by the time Kieran woke again, its silver light spilling through the nursery windows and painting everything in shades of pearl and shadow. I had been dozing in the chair beside his bed, my hand still loosely clasped in his, when I felt his fingers tighten around mine. "Mira?" His voice was small, uncertain, as if he feared I might have been a dream. "I'm here," I assured him, leaning forward so he could see my face in the moonlight. "I promised, remember?" Relief flooded his extraordinary silver eyes. "You're real." "Very real," I said with a soft smile. "How do you feel?" Kieran considered this with the seriousness of a child who had been forced to think about his body's betrayals far too much. "Hungry," he said finally, and the word held such surprise that it broke my heart a little. "That's good," I told him, squeezing his hand gently. "That's very good. Shall we see if the Kitchens can bring you something?" Before he could answer, the door opened quietly. Theron entered, moving with the careful silence of a predator despite his size. His eyes went immediately to his son, and the naked relief on his face when he saw Kieran awake and alert was almost painful to witness. "Papa," Kieran said, and there was warmth in his voice now, not the cold distance that had characterized their recent interactions. "Hello, little wolf," Theron replied, his own voice rough with emotion. He approached the bed, kneeling beside my chair so he could be at eye level with his son. "You gave me quite a scare." "I'm sorry," Kieran whispered, his eyes filling with tears again. "I didn't mean to. I couldn't." "Shh, it's all right." Theron reached out, his large hand gentle as he cupped his son's small face. "You have nothing to apologize for. I'm just glad you're back with me." Kieran's lower lip trembled. "I miss Mama so much it hurts, Papa, right here." He placed his free hand over his heart. "It hurts all the time." Theron's face crumpled for just a moment before he mastered himself. "I know, son. I miss her too. Every single day. Does it ever stop hurting? Kieran asked, the question carrying a weight no 3-year-old should have to bear. Theron glanced at me, and in that look, I saw a plea. He was a king, an alpha, a warrior who had led armies and commanded respect from every corner of the territories. But this question from his grieving child had defeated him. I cleared my throat softly. May I, Alpha King? He nodded, gratitude evident in his expression. I turned to Kieran, choosing my words carefully. The hurt doesn't stop, little prince, not completely, but it changes. Right now, it's sharp and terrible, like a wound that's fresh and bleeding. But over time, it becomes more like, I searched for the right comparison, like a scar. It's still there. You can still feel it, but it doesn't bleed anymore. And sometimes, when you remember your mama, instead of just feeling sad, you'll feel warm too. You'll remember how much she loved you, and that love will feel like sunshine instead of pain. Kieran studied my face intently. Is that what happened with your mama and papa? Yes, I said honestly. It took a long time. Years. And I still have days when the hurt feels fresh again. But most of the time now, when I think of them, I remember the good things. The way my mama used to braid flowers in my hair. The way my papa would carry me on his shoulders so I could see over the crowd at pack gatherings. Those memories don't hurt anymore. They make me smile. Will I forget her? The question came out as barely a whisper, thick with terror. Everyone says I'm too young. That I won't remember. You won't forget, Theron said fiercely, his voice thick with emotion. I won't let you forget. We'll tell you stories about her every day if you want. About how brave she was, how kind, how much she loved you. Will you tell me stories, Mira? Kieran asked, turning those luminous eyes on me. About your mama and papa? The request surprised me. No one had asked me about my parents in years. After the rejection, after I'd become invisible, my past had become something I carried silently, never speaking of it, never sharing it. If you'd like, I said softly. Though I should warn you, some of my stories are quite silly. A ghost of a smile touched Kieran's lips. I like silly. Then I'll tell you about the time my papa tried to teach me to fish and ended up falling in the river himself. He came home soaking wet with a fish stuck in his pants, and my mama laughed so hard she cried. Kieran giggled, an actual, genuine giggle that lit up his small face like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Theron's eyes widened slightly, as if he'd forgotten his son was capable of such a sound. Did the fish bite him? Kieran asked. Oh yes, right on the... I caught myself, glancing at Theron. Well, let's just say he sat very carefully for a few days afterward. This earned another giggle, stronger this time. The sound filled the nursery like music, chasing away the oppressive weight of grief that had saturated these walls for months. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. At Theron's command, a servant entered carrying a tray laden with food-warm broth, soft bread with butter, sliced, fruits, and a cup of honeyed milk. The smells made my own stomach growl, reminding me I hadn't eaten since before dawn. Kieran eyed the food warily, some of the light fading from his expression. You said you were hungry, I reminded him gently. What if it makes me sick again? He asked, fear creeping into his voice. What if I can't? What if we eat together? I suggested, looking to Theron for permission. Would that help? Theron nodded immediately and gestured to the servant. Bring 2 more trays. One for Mira and one for myself. As we waited, I kept Kieran engaged with gentle conversation, asking him about his favorite toys, his favorite places in the Citadel, anything to keep his mind from spiraling back into anxiety about eating. When the additional trays arrived, we arranged ourselves around Kieran's bed, Theron sitting on one side, me on the other, all of us with plates of food. The Alpha King, the rejected Omega, and the grieving pup, sharing a bray meal in the moonlight. Shall we make a game of it? I suggested. I'll take a bite, then you take a bite, then your papa takes a bite. We'll go round and round until our plates are empty. Kieran considered this. What if I can't finish? Then we stop, Theron said firmly. No pressure, little wolf. Just try your best. Quote, I lifted a spoonful of broth to my lips and took a sip, making a show of how good it tasted. Your turn, Prince Kieran. Slowly, hesitantly, Kieran reached for his own spoon. His hand shook slightly as he brought it to his mouth, but he managed to swallow the broth without difficulty. Relief flooded his features. "Excellent," I praised. "Now Papa's turn." We continued this way, taking turns, keeping the atmosphere light and playful. I told more stories about my parents, silly ones, happy ones, stories that made Kieran smile and sometimes laugh. Theron shared stories, too, about Kieran's mother, careful to focus on joyful memories rather than sorrowful ones. "Your mama once convinced me to dance in the rain," Theron said, his expression softening with memory. "Right in the center of the courtyard, in front of all the pack. I was supposed to be dignified, kingly, but she just laughed and pulled me out into the storm, and we danced until we were both soaked to the bone." "What happened?" Kieran asked, bread forgotten in his hand as he listened intently. "We both caught terrible colds," Theron admitted with a rueful smile. "Spent 3 days sneezing and coughing, but your mama said it was worth it. She said some moments are too precious to worry about dignity or duty, that sometimes you have to just let yourself be alive." "I remember the rain," Kieran said suddenly, his eyes distant. "Mama took me outside once when it rained. She said the rain was the moon goddess crying, but they were happy tears because she loved her wolves so much." "That sounds like something she would say," Theron agreed, his voice thick. By the time our meal ended, Kieran had eaten more than I dared hope for, nearly an entire bowl of broth, half a slice of bread, and several pieces of fruit. Color had returned to his cheeks, and though he was clearly exhausted, it was the healthy exhaustion of a child who had used energy, rather than the terrible weakness of starvation. "Tired?" Kieran murmured, his eyelids drooping. But if I sleep, will you be gone when I wake up?" The question was directed at me, and the fear in it was palpable. He had lost his mother to sleep. She had gone to bed one night and never woken up, a sudden illness that had taken her before anyone could save her. Now sleep was associated with abandonment, with loss, with the terror of waking to find that everything he loved had vanished. "I'll be right here," I promised, settling back into my chair. "I'll be here when you wake up, and we'll have breakfast together. I promise." "Can you sing again?" he asked, his small hand finding mine. "Please?" "Of course." As Theron helped arrange Kieran's blankets, I began to sing a different lullaby this time, one my grandmother had sung about the stars and the wolves who ran beneath them. My voice filled the nursery, that strange power weaving through the melody like silver thread through fabric. I watched as Kieran's eyes grew heavy, his breathing evening out. Across the bed, Theron stood still, his gaze fixed on his son with an expression of such profound relief and gratitude that it made my chest ache. When Kieran finally slipped into sleep, his hand still clasped in mine, I let the song fade to a gentle hum, then to silence. Theron moved around the bed, approaching me with careful steps. "You should rest," he said quietly. "The guest quarters I mentioned have been prepared. They're connected to the nursery through that door." He gestured to a panel I hadn't noticed before. "You'll be able to hear if he calls for you." "I promised I'd be here," I said, reluctant to leave even for a moment. "You will be here just in the next room, and I'll stay with him tonight." Theron's expression softened. "You've done so much already, Mira. You need to take care of yourself too." He was right, though I was reluctant to admit it. My body ached from the tension of the day, and exhaustion was beginning to creep into my bones. "All right," I agreed. "But if he wakes and asks for me, I'll come get you immediately. You have my word." I carefully extracted my hand from Kieran's, tucking his arm beneath the blankets. He murmured something in his sleep, but didn't wake. Theron walked me to the connecting door, opening it to reveal a room that was far more luxurious than anything I'd ever occupied. Soft carpets, a large bed piled with furs and blankets, a fire crackling in a stone hearth, windows that overlooked the moonlit gardens below. "This is too much," I protested automatically. "You're the one who saved my son," Theron interrupted firmly. "There is no just about it. These quarters are yours for as long as you remain in this wing." I didn't know how to respond to such generosity, such acknowledgement of my worth. For 3 years, I had been nothing, no one. Now I stood in a room fit for nobility, granted to me by the Alpha King himself. "Thank you," I managed finally. Theron studied me for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes intense. "Your voice," he said quietly. what you can do with it. That's a gift from the moon goddess herself. Anyone who told you otherwise was a fool." The words hit me harder than any blow. I felt tears prick my eyes and blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure. "My grandmother said the same thing," I whispered. "But after the rejection, I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was cursed." "No." Theron's voice was absolutely certain. "Not cursed. Blessed. And I thank the moon goddess every night that you found your way to my territory, even if it took nearly losing my son for me to discover you." He reached out then, his large hand settling on my shoulder with surprising gentleness. The touch sent a jolt through me, not unpleasant, but intense. My Omega instincts flared, confused by the gesture. This was an alpha, a king, touching me with something that felt almost like affection, respect. "Rest well, Mira," he said, withdrawing his hand and stepping back into the nursery. "Tomorrow we'll discuss your new position here properly. But for tonight, just rest. You've earned it." The door closed softly, leaving me alone in the firelit room. I stood there for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, I had been a kitchen Omega, invisible and insignificant. Tonight, I stood in quarters near the royal nursery, granted permission to care for the prince, acknowledged by the Alpha King himself. It felt like a dream, like something that couldn't possibly be real. I moved to the window, looking out at the moon hanging fat and full in the night sky. Somewhere, my grandmother was among the stars, watching. What would she think of this? Would she be proud? Worried? Both? "I don't know what I'm doing," I whispered to the moon, to my grandmother's memory, to the moon goddess herself. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, but I'll try. For Kieran. I'll try." The moon offered no answers, just its steady silver light. After washing my face in the basin provided, and changing into the soft nightgown laid out on the bed, far finer than anything I'd ever owned, I slipped beneath the furs and blankets. The bed was impossibly comfortable, like sleeping on a cloud. But despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me for a long time. My mind kept replaying the day's events, Kieran's weak form in the bed, Theron's broken plea, the moment the prince had opened his eyes and truly seen me, the way his small hand had fit so perfectly in mine. And underneath all of it, a growing awareness of something I couldn't quite name, a connection, a purpose, a sense that my life had just shifted irrevocably onto a new path, one I had never imagined walking. I thought of the rejection scar on my shoulder blade, that permanent mark of shame that I carried. For 3 years, it had been a reminder of everything I'd lost, everything I'd never be. But maybe, just maybe, it could become something different. A reminder not of what was taken from me, but of what I had survived, what I had overcome to get here, to this moment, to this chance at redemption. Eventually, exhaustion won out over my racing thoughts, and I drifted into sleep. I dreamed of silver eyes and moonlight, of a small hand in mine and a song that could heal wounds the world couldn't see. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and a soft knock at the connecting door. "Mira?" Theron's voice, quiet but urgent. "He's asking for you." I was up immediately, pulling a robe over my nightgown and hurrying through the door. In the nursery, Kieran sat up in bed, his eyes searching frantically until they found me. "You came back," he breathed, relief flooding his features. "Of course I did," I said, crossing to him quickly and taking his outstretched hand. "I promised, didn't I?" "People break promises," Kieran said, and the cynicism in his young voice was heartbreaking. "Not me," I told him firmly. "When I make a promise to you, I keep it. Always." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded, seeming satisfied. "I'm hungry again," he announced, and the words were like music. "That's wonderful," I said, squeezing his hand. "Shall we have breakfast together? All 3 of us? Can we eat outside?" Kieran asked, looking at his father. "In the garden?" Mama liked the garden. Theron's expression tightened briefly with emotion, but he nodded. "Of course. The morning is beautiful. It's perfect for an outdoor meal." As servants were dispatched to prepare breakfast in the garden, I helped Kieran dress appropriate, process that revealed just how much weight he'd lost. His clothes hung on his small frame, and I made a mental note to mention this to the healers. He would need careful monitoring as he regained his strength. "Will you sing while we eat?" Kieran asked as I combed his platinum hair. "If you'd like." "I like your voice," he said simply. "It makes the bad feelings go away." The statement was so innocent, so trusting, that it made my heart clench. This child had given me his trust so completely, so quickly. The responsibility of that trust was both terrifying and precious. The garden was indeed perfect, awash in morning sunlight, flowers blooming despite the autumn chill, a small fountain providing gentle music in the background. A table had been set up near the fountain, laden with fresh bread, fruit, eggs, and honey. We settled around the table, and I was struck by the strangeness of it all. An alpha king, a prince, and a rejected omega, sharing breakfast in the royal gardens as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As we ate, Kieran peppered me with questions. "Where did you learn to sing like that? Do you know other songs? Can you sing in the old tongue?" My mama knew some words in the old tongue, but not many. I answered each question patiently, charmed by his enthusiasm. This was a different child from the one I'd seen yesterday, still fragile, still grieving, but alive in a way he hadn't been. "The old tongue is mostly forgotten now," I explained. But my grandmother knew it well. She said it was the language the first wolves spoke, given to them by the moon goddess herself. The songs in the old tongue have special power because they're tied to our most ancient nature. "Is that why your singing made me feel better?" Kieran asked. "Because it was in the old tongue?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. "Partly," I said, "but I think it's more than just the words. I think maybe the moon. Goddess gave me a gift that lets me reach people who are hurting, to help them feel less alone." "That's a good gift," Kieran said seriously. "Better than being strong or fast. Lots of people are strong or fast, but not many people can make the hurt feel smaller. Out of the mouths of children, as my grandmother used to say." "Your son is very wise," I told Theron, who had been watching our exchange with an unreadable expression. "He is," Theron agreed, his voice warm with pride. "Takes after his mother in that regard." "Mama said wisdom comes from paying attention," Kieran recited, clearly quoting. "She said most people are too busy talking to actually see what's happening around them." "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman," I said softly. "She was," Theron confirmed. "Luna Ariana was. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Strong-willed, compassionate, fierce when she needed to be, gentle when gentleness was required. She could command an army one moment and comfort a crying pup the next." "Tell Mira about the wolves," Kieran urged. "About how Mama made friends with the wild ones." Theron smiled, a genuine expression that softened his usually stern features. Ariana had a gift with animals, especially wolves in their shifted form. Even wild wolves that had never been part of a pack would approach her without fear. She used to walk in the deep forest, and they would follow her like she was their alpha. "The moon goddess blessed her," Kieran said confidently. "That's what everyone says. That she was touched by the goddess." A thought occurred to me, one that sent a shiver down my spine. When did Luna Ariana pass?" 6 months ago, Theron said, his expression darkening. "Almost to the day. An illness that came on suddenly. She was fine in the morning, complaining of a headache by noon, and by evening." He couldn't finish the sentence. 6 months. And Kieran, in his grief, had stopped eating 5 days ago. Which meant, for nearly 6 months, he had been slowly declining, slowly pulling away from the world until he reached the point of giving up entirely. "The healers had never seen anything like it," Theron continued. "They tried everything, herbs, potions, prayers to the moon goddess. Nothing helped. She just faded. Within 12 hours, she was gone. Something about this troubled me, though I couldn't identify why. An illness that sudden, that resistant to all treatment, that specific in its target." But before I could pursue the thought, Kieran spoke up. "Mira, will you teach me your songs? The ones in the old tongue?" I smiled, pushing away my troubling thoughts. "Of course. We can start today if you'd like." "Yes." His enthusiasm was infectious, and even Theron's lips curved in amusement. "Perhaps after lunch," the Alpha King suggested. "Right now, the healers want to examine you. Make sure you're recovering properly." Kieran's face fell. I don't like the healers. They poke and prod and make worried faces. I'll be there with you, I promised. And if you're very brave during the examination, afterward I'll teach you a song about a mischievous moon sprite who played tricks on the serious sun. It's quite funny. A moon sprite? Kieran's eyes lit up. Really? Really? My grandmother used to tell me the sun and the moon were married, but they could never be in the same place at the same time. So the moon would leave little presents for the sun, but sometimes they were tricks. Once, she left a note, saying she'd found the most beautiful sunset colors and hidden them where the sun would never find them. Where? Kieran asked, leaning forward eagerly. In the rainbow. The sun searched and searched but could never catch the rainbow because rainbows only appear when he's shining through rain. And rain only comes when his bride, the moon, pulls at the waters with her power. Kieran giggled. That's silly. Very silly, I agreed. That's why it's one of my favorite stories. The healer's examination went more smoothly than expected, largely because I stayed by Kieran's side, holding his hand and singing softly throughout. The healer, a stern older woman named Margaret, who had initially viewed me with deep suspicion, gradually warmed as she saw how Kieran responded to my presence. His heartbeat is strong, she announced, pressing her fingers to his wrist. Color is good, temperature normal. Remarkable recovery. Truly remarkable. She looked at me with those assessing eyes. What you did yesterday. I've been healing for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like it. I just sang to him, I said, uncomfortable with the attention. Just sang, Margaret repeated, her tone making it clear she didn't believe for a moment that it was that simple. Child, I heard you from the corridor. That was no ordinary voice. That was power, the kind that comes from the moon goddess herself. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed, silent. Your omega status is irrelevant in this, Margaret continued. Gift has nothing to do with rank. The moon goddess distributes her blessings as she sees fit, and clearly, she saw fit to bless you with something extraordinary. Thank you, I managed finally. After the examination, true to my promise, I taught Kieran the song about the moon sprite. He struggled with some of the old tongue words, but his enthusiasm never wavered. We spent the afternoon in the garden, me teaching, him learning. Theron working at a small desk brought outside so he could handle pack business, while still being near his son. It should have felt strange, this immediate intimacy with the royal family, but somehow, it didn't. It felt natural, right, as if this was where I was always meant to be. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Kieran yawned widely. Tired, little wolf? Theron asked, setting aside the document he'd been reading. Kieran nodded, then looked at me, anxiously. You'll stay tonight too? You won't go back to the kitchens? I'll stay, I assured him, for as long as you need me. Good, he said, satisfied. Then, more quietly, I need you a lot. The simple honesty of it made my eyes burn with tears I refused to shed. Then I'll be here a lot. That night, we repeated the routine from before dinner together. Gentle conversation, stories and songs until Kieran's eyes grew heavy. This time, when he fell asleep, his hand finding mine as naturally as breathing, I felt something settle in my chest. This was my purpose. This child, this family, this chance to heal and be healed in return. After Kieran was deeply asleep, I retreated to my quarters, but I had barely changed into my nightgown when a soft knock came at my door. Opening it, I found Theron standing in the corridor, no longer dressed in his formal attire but in simple trousers and a loose shirt. Somehow, this casual version of the Alpha King was even more imposing than the regal figure I'd seen before. May I come in? He asked. There's something we need to discuss. Nervousness fluttered in my stomach, but I nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. Theron moved to the window, looking out at the moon-washed gardens below. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. Finally, he spoke. Tomorrow, I'm going to formally announce your position as Kieran's companion and personal attendant. It will be an official royal appointment. I blinked, surprised. Alpha King, I don't know if I'm qualified for such a... You're more than qualified, he interrupted, turning to face me. You've done in 2 days what dozens of others couldn't do in 6 months. You've brought my son back to life. I only sang to him, I protested. You did far more than that. Theron crossed the room, stopping a few paces from me. You saw him, Mira. Not as a prince, not as an obligation, but as a child who was hurting. You met him in his pain instead of trying to force him out of it. That's not something that can be taught or trained. That's a gift. I looked down at my hands, uncertain how to receive such praise. There's something else, Theron continued, his voice dropping lower. Something I need you to understand. Kieran has lost so much already. If you take this position, if you become part of his life, you cannot leave. I know that sounds harsh, but he cannot survive another abandonment. He barely survived this one. The weight of his words settled over me like a physical thing. This wasn't just about caring for a child. This was about making a commitment that would shape the rest of my life. I understand, I said quietly. And I won't leave. I told you I'll stay as long as he needs me. It may be a very long time, Theron warned. Years, perhaps. Your life will be tied to his, to this family, to the Citadel. You'll give up your independence, your freedom to choose your own path. I thought about what that meant. No more invisibility, no more hiding, but also no more loneliness, no more wondering if I would ever matter to anyone again. I've been invisible for 3 years, I said softly. Chosen by no one, wanted by no one, needed by no one. Now I have a chance to matter, to help someone, to use the gift I was cursed for. Why would I give that up for a freedom that's really just another word for isolation? Something shifted in Theron's expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. You're stronger than you appear, he said. I've had to be. Theron studied me in silence for a moment, and I felt the weight of his alpha power assessing me, measuring me. Finally, he nodded, apparently satisfied by what he saw. Tomorrow, then, the announcement will be made at the morning assembly. You'll be formally recognized as a member of the royal household. And Mira? He paused at the door, looking back at me. Thank you. For giving me back my son. For seeing value in yourself when others couldn't. For being brave enough to sing when it would have been easier to stay silent. After he left, I stood alone in my quarters, processing everything that had just happened. Tomorrow, my life would change irrevocably. Tomorrow, I would step out of the shadows and into the light. The rejection scar on my shoulder blade burned, but for the first time, it felt less like a mark of shame and more like a battle scar proof that I had survived the worst and emerged ready for whatever came next. I moved to the window, looking out at the moon, and whispered a prayer of thanks to the moon goddess, to my grandmother's memory, to whatever forces had guided my steps to this place, this moment, this second chance. I won't waste it, I promised the night. I'll be worthy of this gift. I'll protect him. I'll help him heal. I'll be what he needs me to be. The moon shone down, silent and eternal, keeping its own counsel. But somewhere, I imagined my grandmother smiling. Morning arrived with a knock at my door that came far earlier than I expected. The sun had barely begun to paint the horizon pink, and already a team of servants stood in the corridor, their arms laden with fine clothes, their faces professionally neutral. Miss Mira, the eldest of them, said with a respectful bow that made me deeply uncomfortable. We've been sent to prepare you for the morning assembly. I blinked sleep from my eyes, pulling my robe tighter. Prepare me? The Alpha King's orders, she confirmed. You're to be formally presented to the pack. You must look the part. Before I could protest, though, what would I protest? This was happening whether I was ready or not. They swept into my quarters with the efficiency of a military operation. Within moments, I found myself directed to the bathing chamber, where a hot bath had already been drawn, scented with oils that smelled of lavender and moonflower. As I sank into the water, my mind raced. Today, I would stand before the entire pack, hundreds of wolves, alphas and betas and omegas alike, and be announced as the prince's companion. The kitchen omega, who had been invisible for 3 years, would suddenly be thrust into the spotlight of royal attention. The thought terrified me. After the bath, the servants dressed me in clothes finer than anything I'd ever touched, let alone worn. A gown of deep midnight blue, the color of the sky just before true darkness falls, with silver embroidery along the hem and sleeves that caught the light like stars. The fabric was soft as water against my skin, flowing when I moved. They braided my pale blonde hair hair I had always kept hidden beneath caps and scarves into an intricate crown around my head, weaving in silver ribbons that matched the embroidery. When they finally allowed me to look in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked legitimate, like someone who belonged in a palace instead of a kitchen. Beautiful, the eldest servant said with satisfaction. The Alpha King will be pleased. Why did her words make heat rise in my cheeks? Another knock, and this time it was Theron himself, dressed in formal attire, black leather and silver clasps, a cloak that signified his rank, every inch the commanding Alpha King. When his eyes landed on me, something flickered in their storm-gray depths. Surprise? Approval? I couldn't read it. "You look well," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Are you ready?" "No," I admitted honestly, "but I'll do it anyway." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Courage looks different than most people think. It's not the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. You'll do fine." "What about Kieran?" I asked. "He'll wake soon and Margaret is with him," Theron assured me. "She knows to bring him to us immediately when he wakes." "But the assembly can't wait. The rumors have already started spreading through the pack about the Omega who healed the prince. Better to control the narrative before it spirals into something we can't manage." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. The difference in our sizes was stark. My hand looked almost childlike against his forearm, but his presence was oddly steadying. As we walked through the corridors toward the great hall, I was acutely aware of the stares we drew. Servants and guards alike stopped what they were doing to watch us pass, their expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion to outright hostility. "They're going to hate me," I whispered. "Some will," Theron acknowledged. "Change always brings resistance, but others will see what you've done for Kieran and recognize your value. Those are the ones who matter." We reached the great hall, a massive space with vaulted ceilings and windows that let in streams of morning light. It was already filled with pack members, their conversations creating a dull roar that echoed off the stone walls. At the front of the room stood a raised platform where the Alpha King would address his people. As we entered, silence fell like a stone dropping into water. Every eye turned toward us, toward me on the Alpha King's arm. I felt their gazes like physical touches, assessing, judging, measuring. My Omega instincts screamed at me to lower my head, to make myself smaller, to disappear. But I forced my spine straight, remembering my grandmother's voice. Being an Omega doesn't mean being nothing. Theron led me to the platform, positioning me slightly behind and to his right a place of honor, I realized, reserved for those closest to the Alpha. My heart hammered so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. "My pack," Theron began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "I have called you here to make an announcement of great importance to the royal household." "Theron." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 6 months ago we lost our beloved Luna Ariana. Her passing left a wound in this pack that may never fully heal. But nowhere was that wound deeper than in my son, Prince Kieran. Theron's voice roughened with emotion. For months, I watched him fade. Watched him pull away from life itself. 5 days ago, he stopped eating entirely. Our healers tried everything. Nothing worked. I feared. He paused, visibly composing himself. I feared I would lose my son as I lost my mate. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Then, 2 days ago, an Omega from our own kitchens came to the nursery. Theron gestured to me, and I felt hundreds of eyes focus with laser intensity. Mira, once of the Raven Shadow pack, rejected and exiled, found refuge in our territory 3 years ago. She has served quietly and faithfully ever since, asking for nothing, expecting nothing. I could feel the judgment in some of those stares. Rejected. The word carried shame in wolf society, an implication that there was something wrong, something broken about the one cast out. But what Raven Shadow saw as a flaw, the moon goddess blessed as a gift. Theron's voice grew stronger, more certain. Mira possesses a voice touched by the divine, a voice that can reach souls in ways ordinary healing cannot. When Kieran refused all food, all comfort, all reason, Mira sang to him. And my son, for the first time in days, responded. He ate. He smiled. He chose to live. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd. Therefore, effective immediately, I am appointing Mira as royal companion to Prince Kieran, with all the rights, privileges, and protections that title carries. She will have quarters in the royal wing, authority over the prince's care, and my complete trust in matters concerning his well-being. The murmurs grew louder, not all of them pleased. Furthermore, Theron continued, his tone brooking no argument, I declare that any wolf who speaks against her, who questions her worthiness, or who treats her with anything less than the respect due to a member of the royal household will answer directly to me. She is under my protection, she is Pack, and she is ours. The possessiveness in that final word sent a shiver through me that I didn't fully understand. Before anyone could respond, the great hall doors burst open. Margaret rushed in, carrying a struggling Kieran in her arms. "Papa!" the prince cried out, his small voice cracking with distress. "Where's Mira? She promised she wouldn't leave." The entire assembly watched as Kieran's desperate eyes searched the crowd, finally landing on me. Relief flooded his features, but he continued to struggle against Margaret's hold. "I'm here," I called out, stepping forward instinctively. "I'm right here, Kieran. You left." Accusation and hurt colored his words. "I woke up and you were gone." I moved without thinking, crossing the platform and descending the steps to where Margaret stood. The healer released Kieran immediately, and the small prince launched himself at me. I caught him, his arms wrapping around my neck, with desperate strength. "I didn't leave," I said softly, my hand stroking his back in soothing circles. "I just had to come here for a little while. But I told you when I make a promise to you, I keep it. I will always come back." "Promise?" His voice was muffled against my shoulder. "Promise." I became aware, suddenly, of the absolute silence in the hall. Every pack member was watching this exchange, watching the prince cling to me with the desperation of a child who had lost too much already. "See?" I whispered to Kieran. "I'm here. I'm safe. You're safe. Everything is all right." Slowly, his grip loosened. He pulled back enough to look at my face, his silver eyes searching mine for any hint of deception. Finding none, he nodded, satisfied. Then he seemed to notice, for the first time, where we were. His eyes widened as he took in the crowd, the great hall, his father standing on the platform above us. "Why is everyone staring?" he asked in a loud whisper that carried across the silent room. "Because your papa was just telling them something very important," I explained. "About me staying with you." "Good," Kieran announced, turning to face the crowd with all the imperious authority of a prince, despite his small size and pajamas. "Mira is mine. She sings to me and tells me stories and makes the sad feelings smaller. Anyone who's mean to her will have to deal with me." The declaration, delivered with such fierce seriousness from such a small child, broke the tension in the room. Laughter rippled through the crowd, not mocking, but warm, affectionate. Theron descended from the platform, joining us. He placed a hand on Kieran's head, ruffling his platinum hair. "Well said, son. Though I think I had the threatening part covered." "I can help," Kieran insisted. "I'm very scary when I want to be." He attempted what was probably meant to be a fierce expression but came across as adorably ridiculous. More laughter, and I felt some of the hostility in the nest room dissipate, replaced by a collective affection for their young prince. It was masterfully done. Whether Kieran had intended it or not, his public display of attachment to me legitimized my position in a way Theron's words alone couldn't have. "Let us return to the nursery," Theron said, addressing the crowd once more. "The announcement is made. Questions or concerns may be brought to Beta Commander Marcus. This assembly is concluded." As the pack began to disperse, I carried Kieran, who refused to be set down, back through the corridors. Several pack members approached as we walked, offering words of congratulations or gratitude. "Thank you for saving our prince," a middle-aged Beta woman said, tears in her eyes. "We were so worried." "Blessings of the moon goddess on you," an elderly Omega added, pressing a small carved charm into my free hand, "for helping our boy." But not all the reactions were positive. I caught glimpses of sneers, heard whispered comments that carried words like rejected and opportunist and unworthy. A young female alpha watched me pass with undisguised hatred, her lip curling in disgust. "Ignore them," Theron murmured, close enough that only I could hear. "They'll come around or they won't. It doesn't matter." But it did matter. These were the wolves I would be living among, serving alongside. Their acceptance or rejection would shape every day of my life here. Back in the nursery, Kieran finally consented to be set down, but he kept one hand firmly wrapped around two of my fingers, as if afraid I might vanish if he let go completely. I was scared. He admitted quietly once we were alone with Theron. "I thought you left like Mama did." My heart broke for him. "Kieran, look at me." I knelt so we were eye level. "Your mama didn't want to leave you. She got sick. Something bad happened that she couldn't control. But I promise you, if she'd had any choice, any way to stay, she would have. Because she loved you more than anything in the world." "How do you know?" His voice was small, vulnerable. "Because that's what it means to be a mother," I said softly. "It means loving your child so much that their happiness matters more than your own life. And your mama fought so hard to stay with you. The sickness was just too strong." Kieran's eyes filled with tears. "I miss her. I know, sweetheart. And it's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad. But she wouldn't want you to stop living because she couldn't stay. She would want you to be happy, to grow strong, to have a wonderful life. That's the best way to honor her memory, by living fully, the way she would have wanted you to." A sob broke from Kieran's throat, and then he was crying in earnest, the kind of deep, cleansing tears he'd been holding back for months. I gathered him into my arms, rocking gently, singing softly in the old tongue, a song about grief and love and the eternal bonds that death cannot break. Theron stood nearby, his own eyes gleaming with unshed tears, watching his son finally release the pain he'd been carrying. It took a long time for the tears to subside. When they did, Kieran was exhausted, wrung out, but somehow lighter, as if the weight he'd been carrying had lessened just a bit. "Will you nap with me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't want to be alone." I glanced at Theron, who nodded immediately. "Of course," I said. "Come on, let's get you settled." I lay down beside Kieran on his large bed, and he immediately curled against me, his head on my shoulder, his small hand fisted in the fabric of my fine gown. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into sleep. I was beginning to doze myself when I heard soft footsteps. Theron had approached the bed, looking down at us with an expression I couldn't read. "He hasn't let anyone hold him like that since Ariana died," he said quietly. "He wouldn't even let me comfort him, just pushed everyone away. Sometimes it's easier to accept comfort from someone who isn't supposed to be able to replace what you lost," I murmured, careful not to wake Kieran. "You're his father. You carry your own grief. But I'm new. Separate from the pain. A safe place to put some of the burden down." "You're wise beyond your years," Theron observed. "I've had to be." He was silent for a moment, then asked, "How old are you, Mira?" 19 this past summer." Surprise flickered across his face. 19. "And you speak like someone twice that age." "Suffering ages you," I said simply. 3 years of invisibility, exile, rejection. It teaches you things that ordinary life doesn't. I'm sorry you had to learn those lessons so young. Don't be. They brought me here, didn't they? To this moment. To him." I looked down at Kieran's sleeping face. "I wouldn't trade that for anything." Theron studied me with those intense storm-gray eyes. "The moon goddess works in mysterious ways. Perhaps she knew we would need you. Perhaps that's why your path led here." "Perhaps," I agreed softly. "Rest," Theron said. "You've earned it. I'll have food brought when you wake." As he turned to leave, I found myself asking, "Alpha King? What was she like? Luna Ariana?" He paused, looking back. "Why do you ask?" "Because Kieran speaks of her constantly, and I want to understand her, to honor her memory properly, to know what kind of woman she was, so I don't inadvertently try to replace her." Something in Theron's expression softened. "You couldn't replace her even if you tried. She was irreplaceable. But you're not trying to replace her, Mira. You're offering something different, something equally valuable. Kieran needs both the memory of his mother and the presence of someone who can help him heal. Tell me about her anyway," I pressed. "Please. I want to know." Theron crossed back to the bed, settling into the chair beside it, the same chair he'd occupied when I first saw him, broken and desperate. His eyes grew distant with memory. "Ariana was like sunlight," he began, warm and bright and impossible to ignore. When she entered a room, everything came alive. She laughed easily, loved fiercely, and challenged me constantly. A small smile touched his lips. She never let me get away with being just the alpha king. She forced me to remember I was also a man, a mate, a father. She kept me grounded. How did you meet? A territorial gathering 20 years ago. I was young for an alpha king, barely 30, recently ascended after my father's death. She was the daughter of an allied Pax Beta, not royalty, not nobility, just extraordinary. We locked eyes across a crowded hall, and I knew. The mate bond hit like lightning. His voice grew thick with emotion. For 19 years, she was my compass, my anchor, my light. And then, he stopped, unable to continue. The illness, I finished softly. It came from nowhere. She was fine at breakfast, laughing at something Kieran had done. By noon, she complained of a headache. By evening, she was burning with fever. By midnight, she was gone. His hands clenched into fists. The healers tried everything. Potions, spells, prayers. Nothing worked. It was like watching someone fade from existence while being completely powerless to stop it. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the inadequate words all I had to offer. Kieran was with her at the end. 3 years old, too young to understand what was happening. She held his hand and told him she loved him, that she would always watch over him from the stars. Then she closed her eyes and just stopped breathing. Theron's voice broke. He kept shaking her, trying to wake her up, asking why Mama wouldn't wake up. I had to pull him away, had to watch him break as my own heart shattered. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't help it. The image of a small Kieran trying to wake his dead mother was too much. After that, he changed. Theron continued, became withdrawn, angry, pushed away everyone, especially women. Margaret thinks he was afraid if he got close to another woman, she might leave too, might die too. Better to keep everyone at a distance. Until me, I said softly. Until you. Theron's gaze focused on me again. You broke through when no one else could. And I don't know if it's your gift, your voice, or just something about you, but my son trusts you, needs you, and that terrifies me. Why? Because if something happens to you, if you leave or get hurt or... He couldn't finish. I won't leave, I said firmly. I told you both. I keep my promises. Life doesn't always give us that choice, Theron said darkly. Ariana didn't choose to leave. Death took her anyway. The fear beneath his words suddenly made sense. He wasn't just worried about me leaving voluntarily. He was terrified that fate would rip another important person from Kieran's life and would break his son again, in ways he might not survive. Then we'll just have to make sure I stay very safe, I said with more confidence than I felt. And in the meantime, I'll help Kieran heal as much as I can, so that if something does happen to me or anyone else, he'll be stronger, more resilient, better able to cope. Theron regarded me for a long moment. You're remarkable, you know that? Heat crept into my cheeks. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's what makes it remarkable. He stood, moving toward the door. Rest now. Both of you. Tomorrow we begin establishing your permanent routine here. After he left, I lay in the quiet nursery, Kieran warm and small beside me, and tried to process everything that had happened. 3 days ago, I had been nothing, no one. Now I was royal companion to the prince, living in quarters fit for nobility, wearing gowns that cost more than I'd earned in 3 years. It felt like a dream, like something that couldn't possibly be real. But Kieran's steady breathing beside me, his small hand still tangled in my gown, was undeniably real. As was the responsibility I'd taken on, the promise I'd made, the life I was building from the ruins of rejection and exile. I thought of my grandmother, of her words about my voice being a gift. If she could see me now, what would she say? Would she be proud? Worried? Both? You're exactly where you're supposed to be, I imagined her saying. The moon goddess has a plan, little one. Trust in it. I'm trying, grandmother, I whispered to her memory. I'm trying. Kieran stirred against me, murmuring something in his sleep that sounded like, don't go. I tightened my arm around him carefully. I'm here, I promised. I'm right here. And as sleep finally claimed me, I let myself believe, for the first time in 3 years, that maybe I had finally found where I belonged. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Each morning, I woke to Kieran, already awake, watching me with those silver eyes to make sure I was still there. We would have breakfast together sometimes, just the two of us. Sometimes with Theron joining us when his duties allowed. I taught Kieran songs in the old tongue, and he proved to be a quick study, his young mind soaking up the ancient words with enthusiasm. In return, he showed me his favorite places in the Citadel, the library, with its endless shelves of books, the gardens where his mother had cultivated rare flowers, the tower, where you could see the entire territory spread out below. Margaret continued to monitor his health, and her reports were consistently positive. Kieran was gaining weight, his color improving, his energy returning. More importantly, he was engaging with life again, playing, laughing, asking questions about everything. But not everything was peaceful. The pack's reception to my new position remained divided. Many of the Omegas treated me with warmth and respect, seeing my elevation as proof that Omega status didn't determine worth. The elders approved, recognizing the traditional power of healing gifts. Even some of the alphas came around after seeing how Kieran thrived under my care. But others, particularly the younger alphas and several high-ranking females, viewed me with suspicion and hostility. I was an outsider, a reject, someone who had risen too far too fast through what they saw as manipulation rather than merit. The worst of them was Lady Cassandra, a beautiful alpha female in her mid-20s who had been among the candidates considered for Luna when Ariana died. She made no secret of her disdain for me, the rejected Omega playing at nobility. She sneered one afternoon when I passed her in the corridor, Kieran's hand in mine. "How long before you reveal your true colors, I wonder?" I kept walking, refusing to engage, but Kieran stopped, pulling me back. "You're mean," he told Cassandra with the blunt honesty of children. "Mira is good. She helps me. What do you do except wear pretty dresses and say ugly things?" Cassandra's face flushed with anger. "You dare speak to me that way, you insolent." "He's the prince," I interrupted firmly, stepping between them. "And you would do well to remember that, Lady Cassandra. Now if you'll excuse us, His Highness has lessons." I guided Kieran away quickly, my heart pounding. I had just openly challenged an alpha female, something an Omega should never do. The repercussions could be severe, but when I reported the incident to Theron that evening, he merely nodded grimly. "Cassandra has been a problem for some time. This gives me grounds to address it formally. Thank you for protecting Kieran." "I'm just doing my job," I said. "No," Theron corrected. "You're doing far more than that. You're becoming part of this family." The words settled over me with a weight that was both terrifying and wonderful. Family. I hadn't had a family since my parents died. The idea of belonging to one again, especially this one, seemed impossible. Yet here I was. A week after the formal announcement, Theron summoned me to his private study. I'd never been there before, and the intimacy of the space surprised me. It was more personal than I expected, filled with books and maps, yes, but also small touches that spoke of the man rather than the king, a child's drawing tacked to the wall. A woman's scarf draped over a chair, remnants of the family he'd lost. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "We need to discuss something important." Nervousness fluttered in my stomach as I obeyed. "Is Kieran all right?" "Kieran is fine. Better than fine, thanks to you." Theron settled into the chair opposite mine, his expression serious. "But there's something you need to know. Something about Ariana's death that doesn't add up." My earlier suspicions came rushing back. "The illness," I said. "It was too sudden, too resistant to treatment." "Exactly." Theron leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I've kept this quiet, but I've had my most trusted investigators looking into it. The symptoms, the progression, the way she died, none of it matches any natural illness, and there were traces of something in her system, something the healers couldn't identify. Ice formed in my veins. You think she was poisoned? I think she was murdered," Theron said bluntly. "And I think whoever did it is still here, in this pack, waiting for their next opportunity." The implications hit me like a physical blow. If someone had killed Luna Ariana, if they were still here. "Kieran," I breathed. "If they targeted her, they might target him. That's why I'm telling you this." Theron's eyes were hard, determined. You're with him more than anyone else now. You need to be vigilant, trust no one completely, question everything. If you notice anything unusual, anyone paying too much attention to him, any strange offers of food or drink, anything that feels wrong, you come to me immediately. Understood? Yes, Alpha King. And Mira? His hand reached out, covering mine where it rested on the arm of the chair. The touch was warm, grounding. Be careful yourself. If someone sees you as an obstacle, if they think you're getting in the way of whatever their plans are, you could be in danger too. The concern in his voice sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. Looking into his storm-gray eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Something beyond gratitude or duty. He cared about me, not just as Kieran's companion, but as... what? I didn't dare put a name to it. I'll be careful, I promised. And I'll protect Kieran with my life if necessary. I know you will. His thumb brushed across my knuckles once before he withdrew his hand. That's what worries me. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Beta Commander Marcus entered, his expression grim. Alpha King, we have a problem. There's been another border incident. 3 dead, 2 injured. The rogues are getting bolder. Theron stood immediately, his demeanor shifting from concerned father to commanding king. Assemble the War Council. I'll be there shortly. After Marcus left, Theron turned back to me. I'll be occupied for the rest of the evening. Keep Kieran in the royal wing. Don't let him wander. And Mira? His eyes held mine. Lock your doors tonight. The seriousness in his tone sent another chill through me. You think the border incidents are connected? To Ariana's death? I don't know. But I've learned not to believe in coincidences. He moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you for being here. For keeping him safe. For... He trailed off, seeming to struggle with words. For bringing light back into our lives. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in his study with a racing heart and a mind full of dangerous possibilities. Murder, poison, border attacks, enemies hidden among the pack. What had I walked into? What was I now part of? But as I made my way back to the nursery, where Kieran was waiting with Margaret, I realized it didn't matter. Whatever dangers lurked in the shadows, whatever threats loomed on the horizon, I had made a promise. I would protect this child. I would keep him safe. I would be the anchor he needed while the storms raged around us. Because he was mine now, in all the ways that mattered. And I was his. The attack came 3 nights later, in the darkest hours before dawn when even the most vigilant guards grew weary. I woke to the sound of breaking glass and Kieran's terrified scream. My body moved before my mind fully caught up, instinct driving me from my bed and through the connecting door into the nursery. The scene that greeted me turned my blood to ice. A figure dressed in black stood beside Kieran's bed, one hand clamped over the prince's mouth, the other holding a blade that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Kieran struggled, desperately, his small fists beating uselessly against his attacker's arm. Let him go, the words ripped from my throat, primal and fierce. The intruder's head snapped toward me, and even through the mask covering their face, I could see their surprise. They hadn't expected me to be so close, to respond so quickly. Stay back, Omega, a female voice hissed. This doesn't concern you, but it did concern me. Everything about Kieran concerned me now. I didn't think, didn't plan. I simply opened my mouth and sang. The note that emerged was unlike anything I'd produced before, raw and powerful, carrying the full force of command that my voice was capable of. It wasn't a lullaby or a song of comfort. It was a weapon, forged from desperation, and the fierce protective instinct that had awakened in me the moment I'd first held Kieran's hand. The intruder staggered as if physically struck. Their grip on Kieran loosened, and the prince twisted free, scrambling across the bed away from them. I kept singing, pouring everything I had into the sound. My voice filled the nursery, resonating off the walls, building in intensity. The old tongue words spoke of binding and submission, of wolves bowing before the moon's power, of darkness yielding to light. The intruder fell to their knees, hands clutching their head. Stop, they gasped. Stop it. But I didn't stop, couldn't stop, not until Kieran was safe. The nursery door burst open and Theron exploded into the room, half-shifted in his fury, his eyes blazing with alpha power. Behind him came guards, their weapons drawn. Only then did I let the song fade. my voice giving out as the adrenaline crashed through me. Theron crossed to Kieran immediately, gathering his son into his arms. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "Mira saved me." Kieran sobbed into his father's shoulder. She sang and the bad person fell down. Theron's eyes found mine over Kieran's head, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Relief, gratitude, and something else, something intense and possessive, that sent heat rushing through my body despite the circumstances. The guards had seized the intruder, yanking off their mask to reveal Lady Cassandra, I breathed, shock stealing my voice completely. The beautiful alpha female glared at me with undisguised hatred, her face twisted with rage. "This should have been mine," she spat. "All of it. I should have been Luna. Kieran should have been mine to raise. The pack should have been mine to lead. But no, the king keeps mourning his dead mate. And now he lets a worthless, rejected Omega into his household. Into his bed. Silence," Theron commanded, his alpha power so overwhelming that even I felt the urge to submit. Cassandra's mouth snapped shut involuntarily, her eyes wide with rage and fear. "Take her to the dungeons," Theron ordered. "Full restraints. Guard her with your lives, and wake the entire war council. We need answers, and we need them now." As the guards dragged Cassandra away, her eyes remained locked on me, promising vengeance if she ever got the chance. Only when she was gone did I allow myself to collapse into the nearest chair, my legs no longer able to support me. My whole body trembled with the aftermath of fear and exertion. That kind of singing, using my voice as a weapon rather than a comfort, had drained me more than I'd realized. "Mira." Theron was beside me suddenly, Kieran still clutched in one arm, his free hand cupping my face. "Are you injured? Did she hurt you?" "No," I managed. I've never used my voice like that before. Never tried to force compliance. I couldn't find the words. "It's a gift from the moon goddess." Margaret's voice came from the doorway. The healer rushed in, immediately checking Kieran for injuries before turning her assessing gaze on me. "And you wielded it like the warrior you are, child. You saved the prince's life." "She tried to kill me," Kieran whimpered, burrowing deeper, into his father's chest. "She had a knife and she said Mama was a mistake that needed correcting." Theron's entire body went rigid. "She said what?" "That Mama shouldn't have been Luna. That she was supposed to be Luna instead. And that I was in the way." Kieran's voice broke. "She said she'd send me to be with Mama soon." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The mysterious illness that had killed Ariana. The too convenient timing. The symptoms that matched no natural disease. "Cassandra killed your mate," I said quietly, looking at Theron. "The poison. It was her. And she's been waiting for her chance ever since," Theron agreed, his voice deadly calm in the way of wolves on the edge of lethal violence. "Waiting for me to move on, to choose a new Luna. And when I didn't, when she realized I might never choose her, she decided to eliminate the last obstacle, my son. If Kieran died, you would need an heir," Margaret said grimly. "And as a high-ranking alpha female with no current mate, Cassandra would have been the obvious choice for producing that heir." The cold calculation of it made me feel sick. To kill a Luna, to attempt to murder a child, all for power and position. "She won't get the chance to try again," Theron said, and the promise in his voice was absolute. "By pack law, she's forfeited her life. Attempted murder of the heir is a death sentence." "Papa, I want Mira to stay with us," Kieran said suddenly. "I don't want to be alone. What if there are more bad people?" "There might be," Theron admitted, his hand stroking his son's hair gently. "Cassandra is smart. She wouldn't have acted alone. She would have needed someone to obtain the poison, someone to create alibis, someone to silence potential witnesses." "A conspiracy," I said, the word tasting bitter. "How many are involved?" "That's what we need to find out." Theron looked at me, and in his eyes I saw not just gratitude but something deeper, something that made my Omega instincts sing with recognition even as my mind struggled to accept it. "And until we do, until every traitor is rooted out, you and Kieran will be under constant guard. I'm moving you both to the royal chambers." "Your chambers?" I asked, shocked. "The most secure location in the Citadel. Guards at every entrance. Wards placed by our strongest mages. Nothing and no one gets through that hasn't been cleared by me personally." His jaw set stubbornly. I won't risk either of you. Not again. Margaret nodded approvingly. A wise precaution. I'll prepare drafts to help with sleep. No doubt the boy will have nightmares after this. I want Mira, Kieran insisted. She makes the nightmares go away with her songs. She'll be right there, Theron promised. I swear it. Within the hour, we had relocated to Theron's private chambers, a suite of rooms even more luxurious than the ones I'd been given. There was a main bedchamber with a bed large, enough for 4 people, a sitting room with a fireplace, a private bathing chamber, and a smaller adjoining room that would serve as Kieran's space. Guards were posted outside every door and window. Mages arrived to reinforce protective wards. The beta commander himself took up position in the corridor. Through it all, Kieran refused to let go of my hand. Finally, as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, Theron dismissed the last of the advisors and servants. We were alone, the 3 of us, in a space that felt both too large and too intimate. I'll sleep in the sitting room, I offered, trying to establish some appropriate distance. Kieran can have the small chamber, and you can have your own bed back. No. Kieran's grip on my hand tightened painfully. No, you have to stay with me. What if I have bad dreams? What if the bad people come back? I'll be right in the next room. Please, Kieran begged, tears streaming down his face. Please don't leave me. Alone. I need you. I looked helplessly at Theron, seeking guidance. What was appropriate here? What was proper? I was already living in quarters far above my station, already playing a role in this family that blurred too many lines. He's been through enough tonight, Theron said quietly. We all have. Propriety can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, we stay together. And so I found myself in the impossibly large bed with Kieran between Theron and me, the small prince finally relaxing as he held both our hands. I sang softly, a gentle lullaby that eased the terror from his small body until his breathing evened into sleep. In the growing dawn light, across the sleeping child, I met Theron's eyes. The intensity in them made my heart race. Thank you, he said softly, for saving him, for being brave when it mattered most, for using your gift when it was needed. I didn't think, I admitted. I couldn't let her hurt him. That's what makes it courage. Theron's free. Hand the one not held by Kieran reached across, his fingers finding mine where they rested on the blanket. The touch sent electricity through my entire body. Mira, I need to tell you something. Something I've been fighting for days now. My mouth went dry. Alpha King, Theron, he interrupted. When we're alone like this, call me Theron. Theron, I breathed, the name feeling both forbidden and right on my tongue. From the moment you stepped into that nursery a week ago, something changed. At first, I thought it was just gratitude you saved my son when no one else could. You brought him back from the edge. Of course I would feel indebted. His eyes held mine, storm gray intensity that saw through every defense I'd ever built. But it's more than that, the way I'm drawn to you. The way my wolf sits up and pays attention whenever you're near. The way I find myself looking for reasons to be in your presence. The way I wanted to tear apart anyone who spoke against you at the assembly. My heart hammered so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts over its pounding. He couldn't mean what I thought he meant. It was impossible. I was a rejected Omega, cast out and marked as defective. He was the Alpha King, one of the most powerful wolves in all the territories. The mate bond didn't work that way. It couldn't. I feel it too, I whispered, the confession escaping before I could stop it. When you touch me, it's like lightning. When you're near, my Omega instincts settle in a way they never have before. I thought I was going crazy. You're not crazy. Theron's voice dropped to barely a whisper, mindful of his sleeping son between us. Mira, I think you're my second chance mate. The words hung in the air between us, impossible and perfect and terrifying all at once. But Ariana, I protested weakly. She was your mate. The bond was broken when she died, Theron finished. I mourned her. I'll always love the memory of what we had, but she's gone, and I'm still here, still alive, still capable of forming a new bond. His fingers tightened around mine. The moon goddess doesn't leave her children alone forever. Sometimes she offers second chances, second gifts, if we're brave enough to accept them. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I'm a rejected Omega. I was cast out, marked as defective. How could I possibly be meant for you? That rejection was the greatest mistake Ravenshadow ever made, Theron said fiercely, and my greatest fortune. Because it brought you here. To me. To Kieran. To this family that needs you, that's better because you're in it. People will say I'm manipulating you, I said, voicing the fear that had been growing since the assembly. That I'm using Kieran to get close to you, that I'm an opportunist taking advantage of your grief. Let them say what they want. I know the truth. My wolf knows the truth. His eyes blazed with certainty. And Kieran knows it too. He called you Mom, before I'd even acknowledged what I was feeling. Children see clearly what adults try to complicate. I looked down at Kieran, sleeping peacefully between us, his small face relaxed in a way it hadn't been in months. This child had wrapped himself around my heart so completely that the thought of leaving him was physical pain. And his father made me feel things I'd never imagined possible. Made me believe I could be more than the broken, rejected thing I'd become. Made me hope for a future I'd stopped dreaming about years ago. I'm terrified, I admitted. Of this. Of us. Of what it means. So am I, Theron confessed. Terrified of losing someone again. Terrified of failing to protect what matters most. Terrified that if I let myself love again, fate will rip it away. His voice roughened with emotion. But I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life without ever taking this chance. Of denying what the moon goddess is offering because I'm too afraid of the pain. What are you asking me? I whispered. I'm asking you to give this a chance. To let the mate bond form if it's meant to. To become not just Kieran's companion but... He paused, seeming to struggle with vulnerability. But my mate, my Luna, my equal in all things. Luna. The word was so far beyond anything I'd ever imagined for myself that I almost laughed. Me, the rejected Omega who'd spent 3 years scrubbing pots in the kitchen, becoming Luna Queen? It was absurd. Impossible. Perfect. Yes, I heard myself say. Yes, I'll give it a chance. I'll give us a chance. The smile that broke across Theron's face was like the sun emerging from behind storm clouds, radiant and transformative. You mean it? I'm terrified, I repeated. But I mean it. For Kieran. For you. For myself. For the chance to be more than what I was told I could be. You were always more, Theron said softly. You just needed someone to see it. Kieran stirred between us, murmuring something in his sleep. Without thinking, Theron and I both moved closer, creating a protective circle around the small prince with our bodies. And in that moment, I felt it, a pull, a warmth, a sense of rightness that went beyond words. The mate bond, tentative and new, beginning to form like a thread of light connecting my heart to Theron's. It was real. This was really happening. We'll take it slow, Theron promised. Let the bond develop naturally. Let the pack adjust to the idea. Let Kieran's needs remain the priority. But Mira? His eyes held mine across Kieran's sleeping form. I want you to know that I'm all in. Whatever comes, whatever challenges we face, I'm committed to making this work. So am I promised, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Outside, the sun finally crested the horizon, flooding the royal chambers with golden light. A new day was beginning, a new chapter in all our lives. And for the first time since my rejection 3 years ago, I felt truly, completely hopeful about the future. Whatever dangers lurked in the shadows, and I knew there were still conspirators to root out, threats to eliminate, we would face them together. As a family, as a pack, as mates. The rejected Omega and the Alpha King, brought together by a grieving child and the mysterious will of the moon goddess. It shouldn't have worked. By all logic, it was impossible. But the best things, I was learning, often were. 3 months later, under the full moon, I stood before the pack, wearing Luna's crown. Kieran held both our hands, mine and Theron's, united at last. My Luna, Theron whispered, as the mate bond blazed complete between us, silver and eternal. My Alpha, I replied, no longer rejected but chosen, blessed, home. Kieran beamed. My mom and dad. The pack howled their acceptance, and I sang a song of healing, of love, of second chances the moon goddess grants to broken souls brave enough to believe again. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.